Hello, everyone, and we are back again with our second edition of CLEAP Security Conference, CLEAPCon 2022. We have a huge amount of learning, brainstorming happening on these sessions, and we are very excited to host a lot of speakers. Over to you, Pooja.
Hello, everyone. Our first session speaker has total 16 plus years of experience in data protection and cyber resiliency. He's a coach, mentor. He's currently leading as a technical support director at Druva. His primary focus has always been to provide high-class support. This drives great customer satisfaction and enables support as a key differentiator for sales discussion. He believes in sharing knowledge. The benefit is twice, and hence he loves writing blogs and articles, as well as he have a YouTube channel, Focus High. So please welcome Ravi Verma.
Thank you so much, Pooja and Shivani, for having me here on this conference today and getting me this opportunity to where I can come in and express my thoughts around a very dear topic of mine, which is DLT, blockchain, and security. That's the most exciting thing happening in the world. So without taking much of time, and thanks for such a great introduction for me. I'm humbled by that. So let me share my screen with the presentation that I have for everyone today, and we can go forward with that. Hopefully the screen is visible.
Yes.
Awesome. So yeah, today I'm here in CLEAPCon to present my thoughts around blockchain and DLT security. And as Pooja introduced, I am Ravi Verma, and I work for a data protection company called Druva, and I am the director of support. With that, I want to take you through the journey of distributed ledger system. And first of all, I also want to bring one very simple thought from Leonardo da Vinci, and something that my CEO is also a big follower of, which is simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And in the statement itself, it means 1,000 words by just the few words that we just see by Leonardo right now. All it means is the simpler things look, the higher degree of sophistication it'll have. And in the background, the more effort it needed to bring an amazing simplicity forward for you. So that's what we kind of believe in, and that's where we define and build products. However, I'm not going to talk about what I do, but I'm going to just bring in a thought process that and a call to action to all the brilliant minds in the security field to come and think about DLT security. Now, I've been using this DLT or distributed ledger system quite a few times within the first 3 minutes. So let's get into it. And the first thing that we will talk about is we'll introduce DLT. We'll look at certain examples. We'll also look at the history of where the DLT is coming from, the overall concept that it has come out of. We'll try and understand why DLT was even formed, why it is considered secured in itself, what are the different use cases, what are the current security posture that it brings with itself, and then the call to action to everyone listening to this talk. So let's just look at what DLT is. And to put in a very simple terms, the definition says that it is a distributed ledger which is consensually shared and synchronized across region, location, people, whatnot, right? So I want everyone to just focus on 3 key words in this whole definition, which is distributed, shared, and synchronized. These are the 3 important keywords for DLT. Now, as we have all understood by now that DLT is nothing but distributed ledger system or ledger technology. It's more of a technology on which or a concept on which you could build tools and applications that could help us solve a certain use case. Now, if I have to pictorially define DLT, this is how it would look like. In your left-hand side, where you have payment system in the center, it's pretty much a centralized ledger. What I mean by that is the authority and the accountability of changes that has to happen will happen at one place. It could be the queries could come from various different locations, but it has to get updated, authenticated all at one place. So the authority of updating data is centrally managed. Now you would kind of contradict by saying that, well, if I'm using advanced databases or relational databases such as Microsoft SQL or Oracle, they in itself have, for Oracle, you will have RAC, or for Microsoft SQL, you have availability groups where it kind of distributes itself, right? So those are solutions for higher availability, which means your centrally managed database is highly available, which means if any node within that database goes down, your database is operational centrally, which means the main hub of your database never goes down. And internally, it is having multiple nodes managing the database for you. However, the overall concept of distributed ledger is completely different than RAC or an AAG on SQL, which is what we're going to talk about. And in here, in DLT, what happens is your database or the ledger or the file, if you want to say like a normal file, a notebook, is owned by every participant in that network. Right? So if for the heck of an example, if you have 10 people network or a 10 system network, each system will have their own database. Now you'd say that's standalone, but that's where the caveat is that each of these databases will be shared with every other member within that network. And then every member will have authority to update the database. That is why there are three important keywords: that the database has to be distributed, which means it's going to be owned by every member in the network. It has to be shared. That's where it is shared. And it will be updated consensually by every member in the network. And it has to be synchronized, which means at no given point in time, you'll have one copy of database different than the other copy of the database, which means at all time, your database will be like exactly the same across the network, owned by different network members. And that's what your DLT is. Now, where does it all come from? If I ask you distributed ledger system, or more widely known as blockchain, where does it come from? You tell me 2009, right? But let's look at the history of it. If you have to really look back in history, you would have to go back to the Roman time, the Byzantine general. And the story goes like, when the Roman army were kind of fighting the northern armies, there was a situation when the Roman army was so distributed that they needed to ensure that they all attacked together, otherwise they'd lose the battle. And the general Byzantine had kind of come up with a mechanism that he had to, or he wanted to, ensure the distributed army that he had in different cities and towns would go and attack at the same time in a very synchronous manner. And what he did was he used pigeons and human beings to share that information. And back in the day, it was not efficient, and you would know pigeons can go in any direction, or humans may have their own hidden agenda. And because of that, they lost the battle. And that is one of the famous stories that goes on, which is where the DLT could have born. However, in 1991, if you read about Stuart Haber and Scott Stornetta, who wrote a timestamp algorithm for digital document. That's again another DLT historically coming from. In 1997, Tim May proposed a digital money based on remailer system, wherein they would be forwarding messages. If you look at the history of blockchain, you would get to know this story very prominently. And in 2002, there was a system that was developed for trusted file systems and untrusted servers by David Maizière and Dennis. And finally, in 2008, Satoshi Nakamoto wrote the Bitcoin white paper, which is widely accepted. And that's where we all relate to blockchain or DLT, and we all call it as Bitcoin, right? But Bitcoin is a flavor or an instance of blockchain, and blockchain is an instance of DLT, distributed ledger system. So if you look at the bigger picture, it's the distributed ledger system, or the distributed ledger technology is the basic technology on which the blockchain is built, and blockchain is the technology on which Bitcoin is built. But there are various other use cases of distributed ledger technology, and we'll look at that. And that's where we are seeing cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is one of the cryptocurrency. You have Ethereum, you have various other coins that are circulating in the market right now. The other example for DLT is your smart contracts. We will spend a couple of minutes on a smart contract that's close to my heart because something upcoming. We also look at certain governments have already started using blockchain for KYC and identity management, as well as property registration. Now you'd also see NFTs, which is digital right management for your digital artwork that today is very widely used, right? Now, going back to smart contracts, it is one of the most effective and adopted form of DLT. Now, what it means is basically an automatic trigger-based contract that you would sign. So on the right-hand side, you would see a diagram, which is basically showcasing that you are a farmer and you have a contract that if there is a drought, you would be paid automatically. Now, draw parallels with it with more real-life example for us living in rented houses, right? So let's look at the folks like us who are working in IT. We get into a rented house, we sign an agreement with our owners. It is due every 11th month, which means every 11th month there will be a 10% hike in the overall rent. Now let's tie it with your own salary or compensation increment. And let's say when you are making that agreement or that contract with your owner, you have some clauses written that if everything goes fine, which means if your compensation hike was, let's say, 15% or more, the contract can get executed, which means your agreement, as per the agreement, the monthly rent could go up by 10 months. Otherwise, no. So let's say your bank has this contract, it is already digitally signed. When time comes, it will basically execute itself and it will validate if your compensation has increased by 15%. If not, your rent would not increase. If yes, the rent would increase and the increased rent amount would be kind of deducted from your account. And that's one example of your smart contract. And it is being widely used in various means and methods. So it's very interesting to me because it's a very real example and everybody could basically implement and make great products, which could be wildfire right now. With that, let's look at how or what's the objective, right? Why did DLT even come to the foray? So as they call it, right, decentralized, autonomous, and trustable. So what it means is it has to be decentralized because right now we all are in pain because of centralized systems, centralized government, centralized banks, and whatnot. And you got to pay their interest rates and their taxes and everything else. So there has to be a concept of decentralization, which is pretty much the reason why you have a distributed ledger system. Now, autonomous, which means it has to be independent. It can take care of itself. It is more self-dependent. And trustable, which means any transactions that are happening within this system is accurate. There's no fudge around it. And that is why DLTs came to the foray, because the need was to have a decentralized, autonomous, and trustable systems. Now, when we go back and look at the definition again, and we see that in a DLT system, everybody participates. Let's say, again, going back to the 10-member network, wherein all 10 members are independent as well as accountable for the changes in your database, which means there has to be a mechanism to update your database. Just imagine you put 10 people in a room and give everybody the right to make a decision. And imagine how much time it will take to come to one decision. It'll be a nightmare to manage that discussion. However, you need a system to ensure that right decisions are always made. And hence you have something called as consensus algorithm. Now, this consensus algorithm has different flavors to it. The most widely flavor is the proof of work, which is used in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency methodologies, which what it means is basically, if you want to make a change, so like 10-member network, if one of the member has to make a change in the database, it has to basically go ahead and solve a mathematical problem. Now, this mathematical problem will have a certain degree of complexity, and it will require a certain amount of time. If you look at your exams today, if you give an online exam, there are certain exams which will not allow you to pass if you have not kind of spent enough time reading the content. And that's exactly the concept here, is that you have to spend minimum 10 minutes to solve the problem. Then you present your solution, the answer, and it is validated that you've spent enough time and that your answer is correct. Then you get the authority to update the information. And once the information is updated, it is then replicated across the network. And that's what is called as proof of work. Now, so on and forth, you will have something called as proof of stake, which is basically you have to deposit some amount, some money, to be able to make that changes. And the same goes for proof of authority, where you are designated as someone who can make those changes. And proof of burn, and you could go ahead and read about these different concepts of consensus algorithm, but proof of work is the most widely used algorithm right now. And that is why it is considered that DLT systems are by default very, very, very secure, because no random person can go in and make data changes in this system. In order to make data changes in this system, number one, you have to be part of the system, and then number two, you have to solve certain problems to be able to get the authority to update the database. Hence, DLT is considered very secured, and that's a blanket statement. And hence, I challenge everybody to think about it and pause for a second and say, is it really secured? And that's where that's a segue for us to get into the next slide, which is where we talk about the exact security posture that the blockchain, cryptocurrency, or the overall distributed ledger technology system brings for us, and what kind of security posture that it has. Now, in order to make changes, if you have been into movies or have seen certain shows wherein suddenly somebody comes in and takes over a particular organization and starts making decisions, what they do is they take 51% of the shares and then start making the decisions. I think it was a part of Dark Knight Rises as well. At the end, Bruce Wayne takes over by saying he's the biggest shareholder of Wayne Enterprises. Now, this is exactly what 51% attack is, which means that in your 10-member network, if 6 people are saying that the data is accurate, which means it has to be updated. Now, this could be a hack as well, right? identity of six members within that 10-member network could be taken over, and then said that all these changes that we are saying is true. Now, that's another story that it's going to take a trillion of hours to get to that, but this is a possible attack. You can also have endpoint vulnerabilities. Endpoint vulnerabilities is very real, and it's something that I could explain much easier, because blockchain is your technology that provides you a solution, but it needs a hardware piece to run, right? So maybe you'd have your systems running on the cloud, or maybe in a very secured environment. But at the end, in order to consume that service, you have to have some kind of endpoint that the users will have to access. And they would access it through their laptops, through their handheld devices, and whatnot. Now, what makes or gives the guarantee that these laptops, these handheld devices are secure, right? That's where you depend on the third party. And that's where your vendor risk comes in. That maybe you're integrating with a third party vendor and you yourself are very secure, but what is the guarantee the vendor is secure and following all the 10 OWASP methodologies? And above all, at the end, humans are going to use all these technologies. What is preventing phishing attack, right? So these are some of the real scenarios, very real threats to any technology, and DLT is not spared out of it. And hence, I have certain examples that I want to talk about, and they are very famous examples. If you look at the first one, which is exploited code, where the impact was of $50 million. And if you could relate to it, it is basically, I'm trying to talk about Ethereum and classic Ethereum. And if you go back into the story, you will realize why classic Ethereum still exists and Ethereum was born. It was more of exploited code, which means at the code level, it was somebody had exploited. Now, it is also a great example of smart contracts. Now, if you are interested, there is a little story behind it that the actual bug was just two lines that were not in the right order. Two lines of code were in a different order, and solution was to just reverse the order. The overall idea that was in the piece of code was that first give the cash, then update the wallet or the account. And the exploit was that keep taking the amount money out and do not update the account or the balance. So money was getting carved out and the balance was not getting updated. And by the time they found the problem and they reversed the code, they had lost a lot of money. And this is when there was some ideological battle as well, because the money was already gone. And in order to reset the overall damage for the participants, a certain group of people decided that we should just go and do the reversal, reset everything so that the owners who were losing or who had lost the money could get the money back in terms of their coins. And that's where a certain group of people who thought that was wrong. And that's the whole reason we are trying to build a distributed system, because no one person could govern the overall business or the workings of a network. Hence, the group which did not believe in resetting the overall network called themselves as Ethereum Classic, and the people who reset were Ethereum, and now Ethereum is doing great, but Ethereum Classic has gone down a bit. The second example where you have the missing key, it's a Bitfinex software firm or a security software firm from Korea, and they have an application called as BitGo. This BitGo is an IDP provider, and what had happened is there was a bug within this app which had caused exploit at the vendor level, which means the organization or the company which was a banking system which was using this authentication application lost $3.5 billion. And finally, the third example that I was going to quote was about a couple from New York. They were able to use phishing attacks to kind of do a damage of $13 million. So these are real stories. This has happened in recent past. So the call to action here is, and sometimes breaks my heart as well, looking at the people who are really the people who can really make changes, just go away and put the risk factor away. And as I have quoted here, that I regularly see the risk factor is ignored by calling the technology itself as secured. Yes, the technology of DLT itself is secured, but look at the orchestration around it. Look at the environment that it is going to work with. Look at the various components that it is going to integrate with, and then decide whether it is secured or not. And hence the call to action to anyone who's listening to it: build, build, build. There's a lot of opportunity to build security products for blockchain or for distributed ledger systems or distributed or application based on distributed ledger technology. So build, build, build. And with that, I would stop my talk and take some questions if there are any. And thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you, Ravi, for the wonderful presentation around blockchain and DLT. I believe this is a very widely used word right now, because everyone is wanting to get into the field of, so-called metaverse and talk about NFTs, cryptos. And I think uh, uh, the talk that you centered around DLT will help people to understand like how blockchain can be used. And people have been making projects on this like since so many years, and now how this has helped a lot of people as well, and at large how people are utilizing these technologies like smart contracts, self-executing, and how it has made life simpler. Thank you for sharing your thoughts around it. I'll just quickly check if we have any questions. I believe we do not have any questions as such from the live audience. And with this, I would really like to thank you for taking time out for the conference today. And we hope to see you next year as well.
Thank you so much, Shivani. It was great speaking in this event. And I'd say best of luck to you guys and the rest of the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
No question.